Alex Ukase is an associate professor of sound recording technology at the University of Massachusetts Lowell, and as you'll discover in this episode, the audio world's foremost sleuth, the Sherlock Holmes of audio techniques. Professor Case's research and professional activities focus on the technical foundations, creative motivations, and aesthetic merits of recording and signal processing techniques. Alex is a fellow of both the Audio Engineering Society and the Acoustical Society of America, and served as the president of the AES. Gear Club is honored to have Alex as a guest, and we admit to having had our alleged minds blown. The episode begins with our host explaining the interview process to Professor Case.
This one hurt a bit.
This is going to hurt a bit.
This is going to hurt a little bit.
This is going to hurt a little bit. Just a bit.
So explain
Alex is well, he knows.
No, but about us.
All right, so you talk 10 minutes. I make fun of him, he calls me an asshole. Then you talk for 10 minutes, I make fun of him, he calls me an asshole. We do that 5 times, interview's done.
Have you patented this? It's brilliant.
Yeah, it's really good. It works really good. It took us all last AES to figure that out.
You're an asshole.
So, anyway,
wait, is that the order? We start with that?
No, but
I thought we can open with it or close with it.
How long have you were you president of AES?
It was only 1 year actual presidency, but it feels like about 20.
Right.
How does that happen? Do you run for office or?
You do, yeah. So you get nominated, there's a slate, and then there's a competitive election among the members, and someone gets elected president. And it's actually a 5-year tour of duty.
Jeez.
So you're president-elect for a year with training wheels. You sit on the executive committee and see how it works and contribute a little bit. You're president for a year, you do the best you can. And then I'm currently in my past president year, which is a 3rd year.
Right.
And in theory, I'm there offering wisdom to those coming behind me. Of course, that's not what's actually happening, but that's the idea.
Right.
And then I sit on the board for 2 years after that. So it's 5 years of AES-ness.
Right. So the fact that the things came out about your email server, like right before the election, didn't hamper your.
I thought we destroyed those.
You did great in the debates, though.
Thank you. Yeah, I thought not showing up was the key. Absolutely. And so you're not asking this, but I have to say that the main thing I learned as president of AES is that it's incredibly volunteer-led, that there's a bunch of crazy people like the two of you and others who work so hard for AES. The thing doesn't work without volunteers who are basically, some are doing full-time jobs for the 2 months running into the convention. Right. It's incredible. There's a small staff and then a large group of motivated volunteers.
Now, they are
totally underestimate it.
People on the floor and stuff like that?
People on the floor, a lot of it's associated with the technical program, all the sort of high-techy meetings that happen off the floor. So a lot of us think of the floor as the study break, and then we go back in for papers and tutorials and workshops and things.
What else do you have to do at AES? Do you have to be an ex-president and walk around?
There's some more ex-president things to do, yes. So a lot of people don't know this, and there's no reason to much talk about it because it's not very interesting, but there are committee meetings almost the whole time the convention is on.
Oh, wow.
So there are committees associated with, there are technical committees on all kinds of disciplines. There's a committee for education, a committee for membership, and they're all associated with organizing events for future conventions. And so if you're a president, you're attending most of those committee meetings, and it just fills the day.
Can I ask you a question? And you might know this. Pro Tools, Logic, Cubase, all these different things work in 24-bit, 48, CDs are 16, 44.1. How do these things get standardized? And is that part of AES that kind of determines how that happens?
Yes, it's not part of my world, but yes. I mean, if you want to be able to plug in the digital output of one device into the digital input of another device, or if you want to sell a spinning, shiny disc, then people need to build players that are compatible with the thing you're creating. Yeah, so standards.
Does it start with AES?
There are many standards organizations, and AES is certainly one of them. And so you're probably familiar with AES EBU, and that's a standard for how to get stereo digital audio down an XLR cable. So yeah, AES has many standards. One of the biggest standards AES is advancing now is a standard associated with getting audio basically on IP. So if you've used Dante or something that takes advantage of what's called AES 67, that refers to AES standard number 67. AES 3 was the digital cable, AES EBU. That's AES 3. AES 67 is the standard for how to put multi-channel audio on a CAT cable with other information, right? So it has all kinds of metadata so that you can also send on-off data and fader rides and all that stuff. So it's a standard for putting multi-channel, high-res, up to very high sample rate, high bit resolution with control data so that it's recognizable by every other device that's on the network, and it can go through a regular internet router or switch. So that standard requires a lot of really smart people to try to anticipate everything that could go wrong, try to define the rules. And if they get it right, then that means all the manufacturers can start to build devices that use AES 67, and it means you and I can trust that when we plug them into each other, they'll get along with each other. So that's a really important role for any society like the Audio Engineering Society to try to build those standards. There's a lot of ways people who care about audio could contribute to our field by getting involved in AES. And it's kind of hard to figure out, but if come talk to me or if you click around the website, you'll find that there are technical committees for almost every discipline in audio. So if you've been a recording engineer and now you watch so much CSI, you want to get into forensic audio and solve crime with audio, there's a committee that does forensic audio, and we do conferences on forensic audio so that you can learn, if you restore a vocal and clean up a vocal, how can you do it without corrupting the vocals, so that if they play it in a courtroom, you can say, see, it is that person, and that person did say I'm a loser, so I'm suing them. So it's a different discipline, forensic audio. Can you restore audio without damaging it or corrupting it for reasons of evidence? That's a cool thing that requires really smart people to think carefully about how you do that. So there's so many avenues for audio, and they're all here at AES.
Is there a forensic audio committee?
Yeah, well, there's forensic audio groups. There's forensic audio conferences that have happened. Yeah, so there's a technical committee for forensic audio. There's a technical committee for game audio. There's a technical committee for loudspeakers and headphones. Almost everything from product to genre that you can think of, if it has critical mass, a committee eventually gets formed. And they meet during the year, but they meet at every international convention. So it's all the movers and shakers thinking about that field. And what that means is for people early in their career, if they can attend these committee meetings, attach themselves to that, they're going to meet the people who hire them. They're going to stay current on the field. It's just a great way to get good jobs and be good at your job. And I didn't know this stuff existed I came to AES a lot thinking it was just the exhibits. And that's an important part of it, but there's a lot of other stuff going on.
I'm learning that right now.
Yeah, of course. And when that was uncovered for you, is that what made you want to get involved in being president and all that stuff? Like you kind of were like, well, this is way deeper than I thought it would be. It's not just boots and stuff like that.
I can help out. And
I haven't really thought about what my motivation is. I think so. I think it was a kid in a candy store sort of feeling of, oh, wow, that's going on.
Right.
I want to learn about that. And then it just became this self-reinforcing thing of you go to one of these meetings that you care about, you meet people who you really like, they're really smart, you talk about stuff you care about, and it just goes from there.
Is it hard doing it from Massachusetts? Do you have to come down a lot, or is it just for like the convention?
Well, so there are local sections of the AES literally in all over the world, in every continent except Antarctica. So Boston has a really active local section. And so I was long ago the chair of the Boston section for a few years. And so it's just been kind of escalating from that. So AES as a corporation, it's New York based, and a lot of the most important meetings require you to get to New York or at least phone in the rest of the time, and I do that. But you can do it. We have board members all over the world.
When you said it was a 5-year term, is the 1 year as president like term limits, or you just didn't want to run again?
It was either impeach me or ask me to quit nicely. No, it's 1 year. It's in the bylaws that it's a 1 year term. And would it be good to have it be 2 years? In some ways, because you learn a lot. Yeah. You're a president-elect for 1 year, and that trains you. But the year goes by incredibly fast.
I bet it does.
2 years means you could do more. That's why they keep you
around 2 years after.
Right. But if it were a 2 year term or a 4 year term, it would crush you because we're all volunteers.
Yeah.
So it was hard to stay married and remember to shower, given all my other presidential commitments.
Yeah.
So it's hard to sustain it as a volunteer effort for more than a year. Yeah, so it's specified as a year.
Right.
It could be different. Are you thinking of running?
No. John is.
I'm not thinking of running.
That'll be the end of it. Was there a founder of AES?
There probably was. I wasn't there. So AES is 70 years old, and I'm a little shy of that. Right. But yeah, I think it was founded in New York. I think
Well, 70, so Tony wasn't at the first, but he did tell me about...
Tony 69? How would you come up with that?
He was an early inventor. No, I said
well,
he
you're
wasn't.
right. He wasn't at the first
But
one. You're
no,
a fucking man.
But he was
genius.
conceived.
But he was at the ones that were at the Waldorf.
Yes.
Right.
That's
Okay.
believable.
You're an asshole. That's
Okay,
you
now
owe
we
me
move
too.
on.
You owe
Back
me
to
too.
Alex. What prompted you to want to even do this?
My mom dropped me on my head repeatedly.
You're in yellow, clearly.
My big brother got away with everything, but I had to be tested.
Yeah.
Dropped on my head, yeah.
Right.
Turns out I don't bounce.
Right.
No, I just wanted to, it seemed like an important thing to do.
Do you
I care
come
a lot
from an
about it.
engineering background? Is that the deal?
Yeah, I mean, my first life was mechanical engineering. I was way into robots. Before I knew they could become self-aware, I was way into robots, but now I'm afraid of robots.
Right.
But yeah, so mechanical engineering was my first degree. Last degree was architectural acoustics.
Oh, wow.
Have you ever designed studios?
I have. I've designed a few studios. So I was a full-time acoustician for about 10 years. I was a full-time recording engineer for about 10 years, full-time acoustician for about 10 years, and now I'm an educator.
So where was the recording done as a recording engineer?
First at Blue Jay in Boston was a nice studio. For a while, it was the only SSL in New England, the only SSL outside of New York, as I understand it. Back when Boston still had something of a music scene in the 90s. And then I came to New York at a studio that was basically mix only with a booth called Room with a View.
I know that place. Do you know
Sounds
that?
familiar.
And it closed, it also closed in the 90s.
Right.
Right.
And are you Boston bred?
I'm not Boston bred, so this is where it might get a little weird.
Yeah.
I'm from Texas, but I moved to Boston right out of college.
Why would it get weird?
And
Mentioning Texas?
yeah,
in
a
this
lot
room?
of people in New York and New England start to ask funny questions when you're from Texas.
Like where in Texas? Is that one of the funny
That's
questions?
a hilarious question. I was born in Austin.
Oh, great.
And then when I was 2, I moved, brought my parents with me. And we went to East Texas so I could get a little bit of an accent. And then I went to West Texas to remove the accent.
Right.
How far west?
As far as you can go, which was
Marfa?
about 760 miles west.
Is that Marfa?
Wow. Marfa's not a word people say very often.
Yeah.
I was in El Paso, Texas.
Wow.
Yeah,
Amazing.
right on the border with Mexico. It was safe and fun back then. It's a different place now, I think.
Right.
And then I went to college in Houston. I went to Rice University. So all over Texas, basically.
So how did you wind up in Boston?
For a job. So when I graduated from college, I got a job in Boston, and I expected to love the job and hate Boston. And it turned out I didn't much like the job, and I really liked Boston. So I really consider New England my home now. I'm sorry, Mom, not going back to Texas.
Right.
And was that a job related to what you studied in college?
Absolutely not. No chance of that. Do you really want to know the nonlinearity here?
Yeah, of course.
So mechanical engineering, I then became a strategic management consultant. So it was a total business job, and I'd never studied business. So I worked at a place called Bain & Company, which is a
Not
strategy.
Bain Capital.
It's the consulting arm of Bain Capital.
kidding.
Wow.
Yeah, so there's some overlap with Mitt Romney. He doesn't know me, but I know him, sort of thing.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it was that sort of job, and I did it for about 3 years. And my colleagues went to business school, and I went to music school. So something went wrong there. So my colleagues now are successful running companies, and I'm here.
You're hanging out with us.
You're talking about. Jeez.
Such a sad story.
That really is a bad ending to that one.
But so I learned
Cautionary tale, everybody.
I learned a ton in that job. I mean, I learned a lot about business, but I learned how to communicate. I learned how to do analysis. I think I'm a pretty good professor now. I can lecture now in part because as a kid fresh out of college, I was giving corporate presentations to senior leaders, so
amazing.
it was a great experience, but the job itself wasn't for me.
So what are you lecturing?
I teach basically audio and acoustics related classes in the sound recording technology program up in Boston at the University of Massachusetts Lowell. As one of the oldest sound recording programs.
Wow.
Yeah.
You like it?
I love it. And the students are just amazing. There are a few dozen of them here in New York at the Audio Engineering Society convention. They're doing me proud. All the alumni are coming out of the woodwork. Yeah, really,
Great.
really amazing students.
So sort of a goal of your program is to get people out in the world and be professional
Absolutely, yeah. And it's even like all schools, it's gotten quite expensive, but the University of Massachusetts Lowell is on the affordable end of the scale. And when I first started there, it was quite affordable. So that's part of the mission also, is a lot of the students, college wouldn't be accessible to them otherwise.
Yeah. Right.
A lot of students are the first in their family to go to college, sort of thing. And they're
fabulous.
And so I have the luxury of teaching. I only teach juniors, seniors, and grad students. So I rarely see freshmen.
Right.
So by the time I see them, they know how to study. They know what they want to do. They're hungry. They're committed. It's a blast to teach them.
Is that by choice,
It's
or
easy.
is that just by coincidence that you don't have any freshmen?
Yeah, it's just kind of the coincidence of the curriculum. So the courses I get to teach are upper level classes. But it's just a joy. They're such motivated students.
Right.
They're really clever.
And do you design the curriculum, or is it decided by the school?
I've come into an existing curriculum. The faculty do design it, and so we're perpetually sort of refining classes and adding and deleting classes. And we're kind of in the midst of a major redesign.
Wow.
Yeah, that's just an ongoing part of maintaining
Is
the
that
program.
based on technology changing, or?
Yeah, exactly. So my program's within a school of music. So all my students are getting a music degree. That means they study music theory, music history. All my students are in an ensemble every semester playing, which is great.
Right.
So they're performers. And so that's a lot of required core work. And so most of the audio is still in the context of music. And I think our biggest pressure right now is how to get beyond music only. So it'd be nice to be talking about AR, VR, and composition, which there isn't quite room for. So they could be doing film scoring and sound for games and all that.
So it was like a great alternative to Berkeley for kids who can't afford to do that thing.
Right. I mean, Berkeley is amazing faculty and facilities, but it's definitely a pricey school.
Right.
Wow.
And I had taught adjunct there in the past as well. I'm a big fan of the program, but I think we're a complement to them. We're a much smaller program, actually.
Right.
For most of our courses, we by design only have one section of each. So we're never accused of being a factory and just sending students through. The students really know each other, and they go through the curriculum together, and it's not competitive. It's really collegial.
That's great.
It's kind of a crazy cult.
How many kids in the school?
In the whole school, I have no idea, but the university is probably over 10,000 people. But we probably have 100 to 150 students in our program. So graduating, about a fourth of that, slightly less than a fourth of that.
Where's the campus?
It's in Lowell, Mass, which is an old mill town. It's kind of the hub of the Industrial Revolution in the U.S., and you still see it. So it's been a town that's been spared any sort of rescuing by other economic factors. It's truly almost been passed over every single time there's an economic boom. But what that means is it's got a really authentic mill town feel, and so artists have found their way there. It's still pretty affordable, and
But no mills.
it's a
Mills
vibey
are
town.
over.
The mills are over. Yeah, now the mills are condos, or the mills are stores and things like that.
And you
But
live
it's
there as well, or you commute?
I live in scenic, tax-free New Hampshire, home of the New Hampshire State Liquor Store.
Nice.
Texas has the Alamo. I'll just catch you up on that. New Hampshire has their state liquor stores.
What I love about this podcast.
What's that?
I learned
You
so
learn
much
things.
shit. Okay, let's continue.
So, timbre.
Yeah, so timbre's a funny concept to me. I'm guilty sometimes of thinking just of effects, and hey, this needs EQ, or this needs reverb, or this needs compression, and I try now to push myself not to think about the devices, but to think overall, what does the sound need to be improved for whatever context it is? We have no context here, but instead of thinking of I should EQ this or I should compress this, I sort of bristle at the idea of you compress a snare because snares get compressed. So timbre turns out to be a motivation for many effects. And when you want to modify the timbre and you understand it better, then you know when EQ is going to help you do that, when reverb is going to help you do that, when compression is going to help you do that. But timbre is also a funny concept because the original idea of timbre is that timbre is how you can tell, say, a flute from a violin, right? If a flute and a violin play the same note with the same loudness, the way you tell them apart is the timbre. So the definition of timbre is everything that isn't explained by amplitude or frequency or duration or location. So if you make all those things the same and you can still tell the difference between them,
That's what it is.
that's all timbral cues, whatever that means. And so what's the difference between a flute and a violin? Well, we would think it's essentially the harmonics and overtones within the sound, right? We think of timbre, we immediately go to EQ and say, well, it's the relative level of all the upper harmonics compared to the fundamental and all that. And so the way we separate a violin from a flute is that recipe of harmonics. But that's not true. I think the most interesting part of timbre is that if you if you were to edit the attack of a violin onto the sustain of a flute, you would likely think it's a violin, which is to say the way the note begins, that unique, indescribable sound of a bow beginning to pull on a string. I chose the lamest instruments. Could we do this again, but with guitar and kazoo?
I kind of like the idea of the acoustic guitar turning that into a banjo. Is that lame enough for you?
No, they're too similar.
I can't say banjo repeatedly in this podcast. That's going to make me feel...
Texan.
Texan, yes, that's right. So if you were to put the onset of a piano onto the sustain of an acoustic guitar, you would very likely be fooled into thinking that it's a piano, not a guitar. The way the note begins turns out to be hugely important to us when we're evaluating the instrument.
Is that the transient attack?
The transient attack, all that stuff right at the beginning, yeah. And to a lesser extent, the way the note ends also tells us the timbre of the instrument. So timbre isn't just the recipe of harmonics that separate the tone. It's also the way the notes begin and end. So that's the layperson's definition or understanding of timbre, which is, can you tell one instrument from another if you fix everything else, level, pitch, duration, and location? But think about what an audio engineer has to do. We have to understand timbre not between guitar versus piano, but between Telecaster versus Stratocaster,
right,
or between this Stratocaster and that Stratocaster,
right,
or between this Stratocaster plugging into that amp, but I only changed the mic.
Right.
And if we're doing an A/B comparison of all that stuff, we're probably listening at the same level. They're playing the same phrase over and over again, the same pitch, the same level, the same duration. The only thing different between them is timbre. So audio engineers have to have a really sophisticated understanding of timbre, and that really intrigues me. So if we're listening to the harmonic structure, but we're also listening to the way the note begins and ends. And a compressor, for example, changes the way a note begins.
Right.
And when I got to that insight, that's when I realized a compressor, which is a dynamics device, it's writing gain. Your primary cue for understanding compression isn't to listen for louder, softer. That can sometimes be the effect. But the thing to listen for is this indescribable timbral shift where the note feels different because of the way it begins. So it doesn't transform a guitar into a flute, thank God, but when you A/B one compressor to another, you gravitate towards the timbre you like. And if you're listening for the timbre of compression, for me, that was the keys to the kingdom. Now I know what to listen for. Not level, but I mean, in my mind now, I sort of picture the shape of the waveform. Does the attack feel smoother or softer or somehow edgier? And I'm adjusting my mind's view of the waveform as I adjust the attack time and release time on the compressor.
Have you run across a plugin called Fission?
I haven't used it yet. Tony's been...
Because it's a lot of these concepts are neat.
And so I love that. Eventide's a big part of this, but I think we live in a time when effects can totally transform the way we work and totally break us out of this EQ, reverb, compression modality, I guess. What a stupid word. And so now we can solve bigger picture problems and then have the tools that let us get at it any way we want to. And I think if we're going to do that, we need to start thinking in terms of timbre and space, not in terms of EQ and compression. It's a little too abstract, maybe.
No, but
I think it makes... Go ahead.
It's great. Are you teaching this to your kids?
Oh, no, I would never tell them this. No, this is top secret.
This is...
Thank God it's top secret. This is the place to keep it really quiet.
Really. Well, it's good because the poor people that'll hear this won't tell anyone.
Well,
they're all auto mechanics. So it doesn't really matter.
There's that one person still listening who thought they clicked on Kevin Killen or Susan Rogers.
They got you.
They got me, yeah.
But is it too far? Like, do you not go into it?
Oh, no,
we
we absolutely
do.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's beautiful.
We speak about, and there's a similar story for Reverb, and it's how we think of things in my class, and I think in other classes, yeah. So like Reverb, I mean, there's I think an intriguing question. Before audio was digital, Reverb was kind of difficult. If you wanted reverb, you needed a reverberant space, so we had chambers. And springs and plates were this mechanical resonance that was cheaper than dedicating a whole room, so you got reverb. But now that audio is digital and things like the SP 2016 exist, then we have digital reverbs that sound great. Why on earth do we still need a plate? Is it just we fetishized plates and we still want them? I don't actually think so. Digital reverbs, if you want to sell a digital reverb today, you probably have to have a few presets labeled plate. And we still use plate. I bet the two of you still use plate all the time.
I own one.
And you even own and maintain one, which is insane, right? How many rack spaces is your plate?
I own it. He maintains it.
Which is not easy. right? It's harder to maintain, I think, than a baby grand piano.
Yeah.
And I think plate reverb lingers on as something we want for timbral reasons. We use plate reverb, a short, dense plate sound on snare and on vocal because it embellishes the timbre. It doesn't transform the snare drum into the illusion of it being in a big space. It just changes the timbre. It augments the upper mids that's flattering to a snare drum.
Right.
And I would say, more than half of the time we reach for reverb to take a close mic track and create the illusion of space. But the second most common reason I think to reach for reverb is to shift our sense of the timbre of the instrument, to make it last a little bit longer. And if you have a bright reverb, or let's say you have a very present plate reverb. All plates are different, but the plates I've measured, they're kind of shitty at low end. They don't have much low end resonance. They're they sound like a sheet of metal, right? They sound metallic, and what that is they go up to about 10K and then they fall off really quickly. So no shimmery brights and no super low lows. They're kind of presence in upper mids. And so if you run a snare drum, you send some snare drum to a plate reverb, then those mids last a little bit longer. And I think our sense of timbre includes some sort of integration time window in our head. So we think it's got more upper mids, not because you turned up the upper mids with a EQ, but the upper mids lasted longer. That's another way to get the sense of more. And it's a less aggressive way to get a sense of upper mids. So we do that to snare drum, we do that to lead vocal, and then that lets us EQ in more edginess to guitars and banjos, I think you said.
Yeah, I like banjos. I do... we have talked for the last year about the fact that I don't mix in the box much. And I've noticed mixing in the box, what I would do with a reverb these days instead of an EQ is to put a little plate or a spring on it as a plug-in to put like a guitar in a different place where you actually hear it more with the reverb. You know what I mean? Because you would think if you put the reverb on it, you would hear it less. But if you put it in a certain niche in that mix with a little bit of reverb, I don't need EQ or compression, and it sits in its own spot, and it's very easy to hear.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I do like about in the box mixing now is that you can just throw that little reverb on there and put it there, and it's easy. It's easier than hooking up the spring or hooking up the plate or, printing a spring in back into Pro Tools and stuff like that.
Exactly, yeah. And so that's another important way of thinking is you can think of mixing as the art of unmasking a lot of the time. And so the idea of masking is that the presence of energy at one frequency makes it harder to hear anything else at that same frequency. And so what it sounds like you're doing with the spring is you're making certain frequencies last longer to make it easier to hear that. Right. And then by association, you then can hear that guitar that has the spring reverb. That's a classic move. And so that's, not about space. That's about masking. And in a way, it's really about timbre. You're revealing it through some available spectral energy that we can hear.
How did you find your way to all this way of approaching music?
Yeah.
Did the architectural drawing or the engineering background, did your background inform this stuff?
Absolutely. My undergrad degree is in traditional mechanical engineering, right? So it's calculus and physics and then mechanical engineering. And what you do in engineering, of course, is you wield physics for really cool applications. And you can't get it wrong or the bridge falls down, and that's bad, right? You with me so far?
Yeah, bridge fall down very, very bad.
Right.
Yeah.
So then when I went to study audio engineering, the word engineering was still there, but the experience in the classroom was totally different. And it was more like, hey, it sounds really cool on the lead vocal if you send it to two pitch shifters, pitch one up, pitch down, delay them slightly, and pan those out. Why? We just do it. So I thought, I want to know why. Or I would learn, compress the snare and doesn't it sound better? Well, I'm not sure I can hear it. We should talk about why compression's so hard to hear. And so I kept asking myself why, like a traditional mechanical or civil or industrial engineer would. And audio engineering tended to be more a collection of ideas and practices. They're totally valid, but that are kind of passed on, and there's not a big explanation of why in the sort of physics sense of the word. And so it's a part of my geekiness that I'm trying to reverse engineer engineering, which is to say reverse engineer traditional engineer audio engineering.
Right.
And so that's what motivates me to dig into timbre or to dig into understanding masking, because I think there's an explanation for it. So like, are you familiar with this idea of a spreader? This is a common effect for you. that you take a mono image and you would send it to a couple of really small pitch shifts.
Yeah, of course.
Delayed. It's a very common effect. I call it a spreader. What do you guys call it?
It's almost like phasing or something, isn't it? If you create it like up and down, doesn't it phase a little bit?
Well, it can. So it can be a totally aggressive apparent effect, and then it would be phasey and weird. But I'm talking about maybe it's not as common as I think of having always available to you on an aux send. You send it to a couple of pitch shifters, one and they're very slightly shifted. Like one's up 9 cents and the other's down 9 cents. Tiny delay. And this was a common thing. I thought when the especially the 949 was out, that people who could afford two of them would have two of them and pan them left and right. And you would turn up the effect until you can hear it and it sounds corny, and then you pull it down and you can barely hear it. But if you mute it, it goes away. So it's a common thing to take an important phantom track and make it seem a little bigger, a little easier to hear by putting this little bit of spreader effect underneath it.
Yeah. I do that with like 5% each way or 4%.
Okay, yeah.
And then I spread them and I put it on a vocal so it makes it sound like chorusy or just something. I don't necessarily do the delay, but I do like that for some keyboards and keyboards, vocals. It's always a fun little thing to do.
But it sounds like you do it in a where you can totally hear the effect.
I do it where you can kind of hear it. Yeah, it's an effect.
So I'm talking about subtler.
Yeah, he's talking
absolutely
about
subliminal.
Right.
But I thought everyone did it. But here I'm with two very experienced, successful engineers who don't bother.
With one experience.
There's no subtlety in this room.
I see. Yes, so subtlety and subliminality don't sell records.
No.
Well, then this isn't a very interesting story. But everyone I know, I think, does this except the two of you. And I asked, why do we do this? And it's because we always do this. Why do we do this? So I start thinking about it and researching. And it turns out if you can introduce for any signal you hear, if it's largely the same in both ears, amplitude and time, then of course you localize in front. But slight differences in your left and right ear start to perceptually widen the size of that track. Right. So, and in architectural acoustics, there's a concept called apparent source width, which is you ask the question when you design a hall, does the solo instrument on stage sound small and point sourcey, or does it feel big and large? And it's desirable to have a large apparent source width. ASW is actually a term of art.
How do you do that architecturally?
And the way you do it architecturally is you have diffusion in the hall that causes decorrelated energy to also reach your ears. So you look at the source and you line up the amplitude with your ears. The time of arrival with your ears is all lined up, but you're also getting, courtesy of a gorgeous sounding hall, you're getting enough differences left and right. I think our brains really like that. We're always savoring the exquisite sameness and differences between our ears. And if you just do a close mic on a track in the studio, you have the risk that you're going to send the identical thing to both ears. And that's a little disappointing. That doesn't happen in this room. I mean, here we're sitting in this grand studio.
It's not natural.
Where is this, Malibu where we are? This is a really nice studio. And so we hear the sound of the studio around us. We get a little bit of differences left and right. And we really like that. And so this little thing of pitch shifting is just enough to create a little bit of chaotic randomness left versus right. And if you subliminally tuck it in, then the vocal or the guitar, whatever you're doing it to, seems a little bit wider. And therefore, maybe that's what lifts it out of the mix.
But in nature, is it their actual pitch shifting?
No, you're right onto it. So this is the next why question of, okay, if slight differences left and right are interesting, why the heck would it be pitch shifting? Because in nature, that would never happen. The only way it could really happen is if the walls are moving. And in nature, when the walls are moving, you should be running. Because the implications for the ceiling, if the walls are moving. You know that, right?
Gotcha.
So it would never happen in nature. So here we're doing something in the studio that doesn't happen in nature, but it evokes something that happens in nature. And so we're just using simple studio tools as a way to approximate that. And so then I go back and measure it and say, well, why on earth would we do pitch shifting? And it turns out the pitch shifting algorithm undoes the comb filtering that would come from the short delay. So it's actually a way to suppress comb filtering, because comb filtering would be a disappointing coloration to the lead vocal. Yeah. So we'd like to have differences at the ears, but no comb filtering. Well, it turns out whoever figured it out, a little pitch shift made the coloration problem go away, but the bigness still stayed. So some engineers way before us figured this out intuitively, which I love.
So you are really informed by this other education you have that has really brought you into this thing from a different understanding of how the mechanics all work.
I think that's a little bit what I bring to the table.
That's really great.
So we have a lot of genius traditional engineers in audio who are designing the hardware and software. That's really cool. I'm not smart enough to do that.
Right.
We have audio engineers who take a more intuitive and creative approach. I'm not that sort of engineer. I'm trying to be the bridge between that, of trying to find the technical explanation for what our craft does so often.
Right.
Right.
And mainly I just do it for me. I think it's fun to think about it.
Right.
What about
So-
the human element?
I don't like people
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I don't
at
blame you.
all.
We've seen a couple. It's not ideal.
Yeah. Ideally, it'd just be dogs, I think. I like
Big
dogs.
fan.
Yeah.
John's got a dog.
Big fan. Big fan. So then does that continue now? So Timbre, once again, back to Timbre. So now we are back to this. Is it a plugin? Is it like an idea? What is it? Like, where do we go from here with Timbre?
Well, so Fission was mentioned, which I've never used, but I think I understand the concept behind it. I have no idea how it works, but that's a way to say, hey, let's put something in the hands of creative audio engineers and let them manipulate sound in a totally different way. Right. So when analog was audio, you could only manipulate it in ways that people could build circuits for. So that was the paradigm that got us to EQ and reverb and compression and that sort of thing. But once audio is digital, why not fabricate wholly other ways to deconstruct and reconstruct the waveform? That's what Fission does.
And I think that's what, from its inception, Eventide has been doing.
Because you did play with Fission. We both played with it. And I honestly was very excited when I got that acoustic to sound like a banjo. I thought it sounded really great. I was very pleased about how
That's because you like banjos.
No, it's just because it gave it a totally different sound that, once again, you could stick in a mix and just, you know what I mean? And just, it would have its own place and live in a place where you could really hear it. It didn't have to be super loud. And that, to me, is a concept that I feel like is very good. When you can hear something, but it doesn't have to be loud, it takes up less space, so you can hear other things. Because you really have to put a lot of things in a mix, and it'd be nice if you could hear all of them.
Right.
So first of all, you're in a bit of a karma deficit unless you turn some banjos into guitars.
Yeah.
I'm working on it.
Okay.
This is the first time I use Fission. Go a little easy on me, guys.
But so you describe it as turning a guitar into a banjo. That is a statement of timbre, right? I'm literally going to take this performance, change nothing else about it except what I think the instrument is. So there have to be degrees between guitar and banjo where you're just monkeying about with the sound of the guitar, where it still sounds like a guitar. I hope people explore that continuum of it's a modified, in some way unique or better than the real thing sort of guitar.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
agree.
a timbre
And I
difference.
think when John was doing that, he was going for an extreme to see.
Yeah, I
where
was literally just trying to figure out how the plugin worked. I had no idea. I'd never used it before.
Accidental banjo, then. You would just...
Yes.
There you go.
Not
Accidental
a deliberate banjo.
which is, by the way, my side project.
Accidental banjo?
Yep. So, sorry.
See what I'm putting up with? But I would imagine from sophomore, junior, senior, that's a senior topic. Or do you go right at it?
You go right at it.
Right at
You
it.
go right at it.
So our students obsess about audio, and we are always talking about what we're hearing. We take critical listening very seriously.
Do you listen with them?
Yes.
To music?
Listening pervades all of our classes.
Right.
Yeah.
Like
It's a real
what
important part
what might you bring in as something to listen to for them? Or do they bring in for you?
Well, gosh, it really varies. I mean, in every class, almost every class, there's something to listen to. So close to what we're talking about now, if I'm want to talk about the timbral impact of reverb, I might play for them an example of a snare drum dry and then a snare drum with a plate, but it's a deliberately short and bright plate with no pre-delay. And we talk about how you can sort of make it not sound like reverb, but just make it sound like a more present
a different
plate,
snare,
a more different snare with a little more decay. So we won't just talk about it; we'll listen to it. And we have a really nice what we call critical listening classroom, which is incredibly revealing. So we can play examples in a way you don't have to fight to hear it. So that's a much more fun way to learn, which is hard to do in a classroom.
When Tony saw you do a presentation at AES, do you remember what you were doing? Was it a Beatle thing?
If I'd known he was there, I would never have done this topic. But I think it was literally I was talking about pitch shifting. And who would give a talk about pitch shifting?
With him in the room?
With Tony Agnello of Eventide in the room.
Some young punk upstart
who doesn't know better. Yeah, what a mistake. Yeah, so I think I talked about pitch shifting in that way, and it's meant to be, and it's a lot of reverse engineering what other greats did. So So the Beatles thing that you allude to is there's the sort of very Baroque piano breakdown in the song "In
the
My
half
Life."
speed,
So the double speed, half speed sort of thing.
Right.
And so I remember as a kid hearing that and thinking that it's a harpsichord, but it's not a harpsichord because I was a kid. I didn't know what a harpsichord was, but I knew it wasn't a piano. It was kind of weird. But if you slow it down, if you played at half speed, which we can do, it takes you to Abbey Road right away. It's the same piano you've heard a million times, recorded mono probably to a ribbon mic, however they were doing it, overcompressed, but it sounds like that very piano. And it's just George Martin playing that part, but he slid down the bench an octave and played it at half speed. He was listening to the headphones, no doubt, with the tape going at half speed.
So it isn't a harpsichord?
No.
Oh, wow, that's great. I always thought it was.
So we could definitely have a listen to it, or
do you have
we could pretend we just heard it.
Do you have that with
listen.
you?
No, we should listen. I mean, we'll listen. Yeah, let's listen.
And then you'll give him the audio.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
You don't mind if I check email and stuff?
No, of course. I'm emailing
How's
you
the
right
stock
now.
market?
Score.
You a Boston Red Sox fan?
Is tape rolling?
Yes.
Can I go on tape saying this? I don't give a hoot about sports.
My boy's a jock.
I like sports.
So I got to hang
sports.
I'm a jock.
He's a jock.
If I was a producer, I'd be Jock Douglas.
Jock.
I'm not a jock. I'm a hippie who likes sports. Give me a break.
Okay. Sorry.
You like movies?
So do you like DVDs?
Exactly. You like foreign films? Certain foreign films?
I do like gladiator movies.
Isn't that from Airplane?
Yeah.
I think it's from Airplane. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can't we steal everything?
Yeah, why not?
So you know this part.
Even
This sounds
time?
familiar to everybody, right?
That's so funny. I always thought that was fucking harpsichord.
And do you think he did that because he couldn't play it at that speed? Or,
Yeah, so
or
I
he knew the effect was going to be...
I think both, right? They were definitely exploring unique
Yeah, of
sounds
course.
for the
Yeah.
sake of unique
Yeah.
sounds. But I also think they had there's a real strong creative vision here. They knew they wanted that sort of part. They knew they wanted it to be some sort of ironically fancy sounding piano thing that was too fast for anyone to play. And that's actually George Martin playing it, right? So the classically trained musician in the room is trying to play, but he can't play it that fast either, I assume. I haven't seen proof of that, but that's certainly the folklore.
Yeah.
So in fact, what they did is they cut the speed down by half, and here's how they tracked it.
I like this version better.
Ringo's never sounded better.
Yeah.
It's like gloom pop. You love the hi-hat access, don't you?
Wow. You know, just on a different subject, there are notes in there that I don't hear in there's some harmony notes that are really exquisite.
Yeah.
And also imperfection, which obviously they let go. And
Right.
a little lesson for everyone there to not fix everything.
Well, that's not going to happen anymore.
But so I sort of wonder, could this idea be born today, right? This is old man talking, but we live in a time where anything is possible, and we would be seduced by the idea to make something perfect. And that it was constraints that made them do this that led to maybe the happy accident or the deliberate unique sound that half the world thinks was a harpsichord anyway. So they were really pushing the limits of what they could do. They had a creative vision that it still had to be this part that we have in mind. Let's figure out how to do it, whatever it takes. And it becomes a hook for the song, a signature sound. And today we could absolutely play something at half speed and then have it sped up and still sound like a piano and make our performances perfect. And that would be disappointing. If this were truly just a Baroque piano bit, it would not have aged well. Right? Wouldn't you just play samples and you could listen to it at the final pitch, play
I
at half
got you.
speed,
So you
and
do
just
MIDI
double
wise.
the So it would be fairly trivial. You could even get a drummer to play this piano part, right?
Right. Right.
And all it would take is patience and gear and a desire for perfection, and there'd be no soul in it, probably.
Right.
So I think were lucky that they had those constraints and it was the right people in the room to push the limit to that point.
So
this has nothing to do with that kind of scenario you're talking about, but years ago, I remember having a trumpet player who couldn't hit a high note, and I literally did the overdub at 15.
Right.
Yeah.
And he played it, down the octave. And then I sped it up, and it sounded on the fucking money. But that was the only way I could get him to play the part. And we didn't realize it until sitting there in the studio. We're like, fuck, he can't get that note.
Right.
So... But that's a similar thing. But it wasn't, we didn't do it because it would be, this is going to be cool. And it sounded like a fucking high trumpet. But, that was the only way. So I know that was the fun thing about going to 15.
Yeah. Well, and you've spoken with Susan Rogers about this, but Prince made frequent use of tape speed manipulation to change pitch to extreme degrees. So, and it was never because he couldn't hit the note. He would invent new characters, right? He has certain characters in certain songs where you're not sure of the gender. You're not
almost like using Laurie Anderson using an H3000.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Explain that.
Well, just that if you go to a live show of hers, you walk out and you think there's a man, Barry White is talking to you.
And it's her.
Oh,
cool.
And you're like, I bought tickets for Laurie Anderson.
I thought it was, right.
This is kind of weird, Barry. I'm finding him sexy.
Love Orchestra, whatever it was.
I don't feel quite right.
Do you have, can you give us one more example of something like that?
Well, so I just mentioned Prince. Maybe if we go to the song Erotic City, so this is going back to 84, and this is a Susan Rogers track. So there's this really high, silly high harmony that's going along with his vocal here, and this is obviously done through tape speed manipulation. And he's layering in female vocals without it.
Well, that's the thing. There's not just low and high there. There's middle, too.
Right, but how do you know that that's not a harmonizer? Did you ask Susan?
Yes,
did she tell us?
Tape speed, yeah.
It is.
I mean, he was an amazing artist. He would largely, and you can confirm this with her, but this is my understanding from her. She would set things up for him, and he would record vocals alone in the control room.
Right.
And so he would be arming tracks, moving up to the next input, and he would play with tape speed while doing that. He'd be rewriting lyrics and all that, and he would try different speeds. He's not just going from 30 eps to 15 eps. He would use Verispeed and all that stuff. So if you go, I could step you through some other examples, but he does pretty elaborate things, not just gimmicky things. It was part of how he worked, part of the workflow. And he let the resulting timbre guide the song. He wouldn't pitch shift what can you do with pitch shift? You can fabricate new harmonies, but you can also build new characters and new timbres, and he really embraced that.
Right. Did you play an instrument growing up?
I'm a broken down choir boy who's an extraordinarily mediocre guitarist.
But you can sing.
I used to sing a lot, yeah.
You did?
Yeah, so there's a lot of music in my growing up since I was a kid. My brother played guitar, therefore I played guitar. I went to a school where it was a little parochial school. I played guitar at the beginning of school every day with my friend Ricky. And we sang, and the choir went on tour in summers and stuff. Yeah. So.
What was what was in your record collection as a teenager, say?
I certainly remember as a teenager, this is pretty funny, but I was way into Chicago.
Yeah.
Nice.
I had no idea why. My brother was really cool. He had Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, all the hard rock stuff. And I was like, Chicago, the Eagles. Mm-hmm. I started off really pop. I liked harmony, yeah. And I didn't know I liked harmony and counterpoint and complexity and that sort of stuff.
The early Chicago stuff is pretty...
And it's early Chicago I'm talking about.
Yeah, it's not like Saturday in the Park. I think it was the 4th of July. It's some of it's really got cool layers.
That horn stuff just...
Guercio,
it's really great horn arrangements.
Yeah, Guercio, Don Blues. Yeah, it's really great stuff.
Yeah.
And great vocals.
Yeah.
And Terry Kath, fucking
tons of
monster
harmonies.
Guitar player.
When Terry Kath left, I left. Yeah.
Did he leave?
No, he
died, right?
He died. Yeah, accidentally. He wanted to show the gun was unloaded.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me? That's really what happened?
Really what happened.
Fuck.
Yeah, it's such a drag.
So you grew up with harmony. Harmony was your thing.
I think so, yeah. And I think also I really liked a little bit of complexity. So I'm a huge. I had to get older before I could react to the emotion of punk. So I was more looking for complexity and stuff. So I insisted Van Halen was the best band because he was the fastest guitarist for a while. I had that short-sighted phase.
And you wouldn't have been a prog rock kid because maybe
A little too young?
Yeah, I think I missed that. But so I would say I am now. I still listen to that stuff. As the surround sound releases come out, I'll sit down for 9 minutes of Yes and surround. Yeah. I didn't much as a kid, but I'll do it now.
Yeah, that's
so
amazing.
you listen to surround?
I do, yeah.
You have a system at home?
I'm lucky enough to have a system at home. It sort of took a while to get there, but yeah. Just 5-channel, but I listen to a lot of 5-channel. It's annoying that people want us to have 22-channel.
They do?
Really? Who wants that?
That there's a lot of work going on. It's
Upstairs,
apparently,
are they doing it?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff going on in AES with people who are doing some cutting-edge, highly immersive audio experiences with like 22 channels. So you basically want a plane of surround at your level and then surround channels all around you, height channels.
Who's going to have time for that shit?
Yeah, I mean, you got to staple gun a lot of speakers to its ceiling before that works.
No,
So
it seems like it's,
it doesn't seem like a consumer format that'll take off.
No, especially with everybody else listening to like in earbuds or through computer speakers.
Well,
Right?
they're changing that too.
What do you mean?
3D earbuds and...
How do you do 3D earbuds?
They're working
in an
on
earbud?
it.
Yeah, it already exists.
Yeah.
So it is possible in headphones to get an immersive experience. Right. They're expensive headphones, but you can have, especially with processing. So if you do signal processing to make it sound like it's coming from above and behind you, it's thrilling to listen to. It seems ridiculous.
You've actually listened.
I've never been in a room with a 22-channel system.
But you've had the immersive headphones.
But I've had immersive experiences, and it's really compelling. Yeah. I mean, I don't know if you guys listen to surround much, but it's a little disappointing to go back to stereo when you've been listening in surround. Not unlike going from stereo to mono. It's kind of mono's. I mean, it's got a vibe, but isn't stereo more fun? Can't we do a lot more? Yeah. Surround transforms it. It turns out height channels also are extraordinarily fun to listen to.
Do you mix 5.1? Have you done that?
I've done very little 5.1, and I've done no production with height channels.
Right.
None at all. No, and probably actually the format I listen to most with height channels is silly movies become silly but fun.
Right.
So
it's interesting because I think in my listening scenarios at home or like in the car. Well, in the car, I guess I could listen. If I could listen 5.1, that might be great. But like at home, I'm always moving around. Like music, I can't remember the last time I just sat on my couch, looking at my receiver.
Yeah, that's tough.
Yeah, it's always something going on. I'm cooking, or the kids running around, or you know what I mean. People are over and we're hanging out, or
So you have friends and stuff.
I have like a couple, just a few, but I mean they do visit quite a bit, which is sad.
Because all I do is sit at home and listen to
put
music.
your head right between the speakers.
Right.
It's amazing. I envy you. So I know we backtrack to this speed stuff.
Yeah.
So how do we ever make the connection between that and timbre?
Well, so this harpsichord deal that's a timbral thing, right? We think it's a different instrument.
Yeah.
And so it's for sure radical pitch shifting is a way to change timbre. So why do you do pitch shift? I hope we don't say, I should pitch shift piano because the Beatles did it.
Right.
The moment you should pitch shift is when you are in a production and you say, I really need to weird the sound out. And I think it might sound funny, not in full chipmunky mode, but I'll bring it up as much as I can get away with, searching for a new timbre.
Mm. Well, though
hopefully not. Sorry.
No, I was going to say that Prince stuff was fairly chipmunky, but very cool.
But layered in so as to be, to be something that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do we think Frank Zappa did a bunch of that kind of stuff?
Oh, definitely.
Do you go over?
I don't have any examples.
You don't, but you acknowledge, and do you talk about him often in your
Not often
classes?
enough. What a great artist he was. But yeah, so he pushed this stuff really far.
Right. I think he used harmonizers, stuff with vocals.
I mean, should we talk about David Bowie's fame?
Yeah.
Yeah, we should talk about whatever you want to talk about.
It's a Harry Maslin production. I think Eddie Kramer did some of the recording. But Fame was, that song Fame was all done basically in one day at Electric Lady. I mean, written, composed,
he wrote it
performed.
in the studio.
Yeah, wrote it in the studio.
Right.
So let's just remind ourselves then of this thing.
Yeah.
Totally created through pitch shifting.
Right.
I believe not a
I
harmonizer.
thought he sang all that. Oh my God! I thought he had a range.
Yeah, range.
Well, so not only is it higher than Bowie can sing and lower than Bowie can sing, but for the pitch the range that Bowie could sing,
They
it's
omitted
never
it.
Bowie.
Right,
It's
they
always
omitted it.
pitch shifted.
Right.
Right.
So this is a bit of vision. They had to contrive the whole thing so that it sounded consistently absurd the whole time.
Until his last one.
Fame.
The last one has some real fame in it, right? On the So they designed. I mean, imagine if someone gave you this challenge. Hey, I need you to build a hook. You, the engineer, need to build a hook. It's got to sell 1 million records based on what you, the engineer, do. And oh, by the way, here's one syllable. That's what you get.
Right.
And so with one syllable, a thing is concocted that sounds like a synthesized vocal in a way that you could not easily synthesize it, right? They had to build this up with a lot of different tracks, a lot of different punching. I'm assuming many of those are flown in from a different tape machine doing different speeds. And it ends up with this whole consistent diatonic descending line of fame that is a hook that, I mean, it was a big record for David Bowie. And I got to think this moment is part of why people liked hearing how absurd it was.
Do you think that's not digital, right? Do we know? Is that
No, that
tape? Do you think that's
probably
tape?
So it's 75. So the harmonizer is out, but Visconti has said the first time he used it was later. So I think this is still tape.
Yeah.
But so I'm friends with Harry Maslin on Facebook. Hey, Harry, but he won't tell me what happened.
Oh, really?
Really?
I don't think he's being coy. I'm not actually friends with him. I mean, it's Facebook. You're never really friends.
Right.
But we got to interview Harry Maslin to figure out what happened then. And since it was at Electric Lady, I'm assuming Eddie Kramer was the engineer that day. So
Yeah,
maybe
but
the
guess
two of
what?
them did.
Who delivered the first harmonizer to Electric Lady?
When I was 17, that was my summer job, working at Eventide.
Wow.
Putting together phasers and flangers and omnipressors and going on errands for Richard. Drop this off at Electric Lady. What? Huh? Taking the train.
And you didn't have the audio bug yet? You weren't thinking, I'm going to be working at Electric Lady one day?
No, I just wanted a summer job so I can buy a bitchin' stereo. Right. And that's what I did. I had the summer job. But then I quit college. Like 2 years later, I had the audio bug, and I knew that.
And then you were making records, yeah.
Well, I was cleaning rooms. Even better.
That's where you start.
Yeah.
What stereo did you buy?
I bought a Pioneer SX 737 receiver, which I so regret not having anymore. But anyway, I had that. I had 2 really great AR speakers, and I had an AR-15 turntable.
Wow.
I think it was.
Good stuff.
And it was really, I had at 17, my friends would listen in my basement. We would listen to music in my basement.
Your summer job was successful. That's
I made enough money to buy a stereo. And I actually, quite honestly, I made enough money to put myself through 2 years of Brooklyn College.
Yeah.
My parents were immigrants. I had the money. So I just was like, okay, I'm paying for college. So, and then I got bored of college and got lucky enough to get a job at the record plant as a general. So,
right.
But anyway, back to...
I was working in a seafood restaurant in West Texas. I was a dishwasher.
Nice.
I didn't have a nice stereo after that.
Sorry.
I did a lot of that. A lot of dishwashing in my life.
I was very fortunate, guys.
But I was a dishwasher for 2 years at the Bottom Line.
Oh, so that's
Where I watched
a lot of shows.
300 shows a year.
Right. What was your favorite show that you watched from the dishwasher position? No,
I wouldn't have to. I'd wash because the dishes didn't come in until the end of the show.
Oh,
so I got to watch the show. I didn't have to sit in the kitchen.
Watch and wash. So what was your favorite
1,000
show?
shows.
Give me one notable show that blew your mind.
B.B. King and George Benson was pretty amazing. I remember that one especially because the other dishwasher, when they would play multiple nights, they would leave the stage setup and leave. And the other dishwasher, this guy Nate, was like a cool R&B drummer. So we'd just go on stage and play.
You guys were both?
So we'd go up and jam. And I was like, and I broke one of B.B. King's strings.
Oh, God.
And I didn't know what the gauge was. So
what'd you do?
I just left it there. And obviously his guy, whoever might have, I don't think B.B. got on stage the next night and said, oh, shit, my B string's broken. But I did break his string.
That was the origin of fame.
Partially because I always thought, B.B. bent strings, but they were like the thickest gauge.
Right.
And I tried to bend it and it just went, bing.
Did he have like huge hands?
I think he was just really strong. Right. But anyway.
But we digress.
That was the best part of dishwashing. But
breaking B.B. King's B string. That's pretty special.
BB. Okay, so we've made the connection now between timbre
And dishwashing.
and dishwashing and BB King. Do you have any other? That's a really good example. Back to the fame. Man, if they did that with tape, how crazy would that be?
It's
So
really,
that would be a piece. They'd have to do that each one separately, or they would vary speed. But no, it's two kind of
And
like
they'd
you're
have
saying
to print it to
diatonic.
another. Like they probably, maybe what they would do is they would do the various pitches onto a 1/2 inch and then try to cut it in time and then refly it back in.
But could it have been like someone holding the vary speed and just doing a performance of it?
So these are all really good ideas, but if you dig into it carefully, you realize a lot of the words overlap. A lot of the fames overlap.
Okay.
Some of the fames, not all of them, are doubled. Well, so do you feel like getting a little motion sick? Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
So what I'm going to do is I noticed in studying it that it seems like the words were done in an every other word sort of way, at least for part of it. So what I want to do is play just the odd fames.
Okay.
And if we hear just the odd fames, it's a little bit easier to hear when they changed tape speed, probably.
Yeah,
My
yeah.
goal is, can you ignore the fames in between? So I'm going to turn it
Okay.
down. So it's going to keep turning up, turning
Great.
down, turning up, turning
Okay.
up. But when we do that, you're no longer distracted by the ones in between. So this is cruel to do to a beautiful piece of art, but it reveals the craft behind it a little bit. First, I'll emphasize the odd fames, turning down the even fames.
Right.
And I think you'll hear the first three have a similar timbre. And then the next three have a similar timbre. And so that makes me think those three were David Bowie singing with the tape speed going just at a different speed. And then the next three were a different take
flown
on
in
a
from
different
something,
Vera speed, right? And then the next three are a different one.
Okay.
So tell me if you think where you hear a sudden big timbral shift that's a little bit revealing of the effect. So this is the odd ones emphasized.
Yeah.
So and when you have the chance to listen carefully, it a little bit reveals that they're kind of done in blocks where
Groups of threes.
in groups of threes or twos or threes,
Right.
where if you try to undo the pitch shifting, you can sort of find that probably this is what they did. So it shows that, and again, I don't know this for sure if it's tape. I'm assuming it's tape manipulation. It shows that they knew that the effect would be gimmicky if you could hear how it was done, so they went to some trouble to disguise it.
Right.
There's the overarching vision of, I want something to go from higher than I can sing to lower than I can sing. I know the hook is just a descending line, but let's make it consistently weird and not have any sudden jarring changes if we can help it. And you sort of hear big changes when it goes to the really low fames and all that. So it's not that we don't all hear timbral shifts, but we buy it as a continuous effect because it's never too jarring. And so I think this interleaving of different versions is a big part of it. But so here's why I think it's tape speed manipulation, not digital reverb, digital pitch shifting. If I pitch shift the high ones down simply by slowing it down, can I find the point at which it sounds like David Bowie? And so here I'm going to shift it down by a perfect fourth. So I'm going to shift it down by that interval and play the entire descending line. You're going to hear artificial. It's all now going at a different speed,
right.
And it all sounds artificial. And then you're suddenly going to hear a recognizable David Bowie voice, I think, for 3 fames, and then it goes back to artificial.
Right.
Those 3 jump out.
Right.
Yeah. Also, there's a rhythmic component to it. It's, I believe, 6 bars. So on top of doing the scale thing, they had to fit it into.
Yeah.
It's got a groove.
It's groove. It's in
Absolutely
time.
got a groove.
It's totally in time.
So I don't think these were done wild. I think they had to have the basic groove going, or at least a click track sort of thing going, that he would sing along with. And I think he would have probably recorded a guide track on a guitar, keyboard, or even sing it in a fake way, because at any speed he would just match pitch with what he's hearing.
Right.
He wouldn't have to
Right.
predict what note to sing. He'd just sing along with what it needs to be. But interestingly, he played with vibrato. So I think maybe through trial and error they figured this out, but his vibrato is unnaturally slow there, so that when it's played back at regular speed, it's a more believable vibrato. So they thought of a lot of layers.
So just so I get my head around. So the theory is How was that done? What was the steps to doing that?
My guess, and maybe there's a worthwhile preamble, I should say, which is when I'm doing a sort of reverse engineering exercise like this, it's interesting to do the search for trivia in history and know exactly how they did that. But what I really recommend my students do is, can they figure out how it might have been done? How would you do it?
Right.
And can you come up with an effect that is as good? So all of my thinking on this pretty quickly says, I'm not going to obsess because I've yet to talk to Eddie Kramer or Harry Maslin in a way that I think it's appropriate to bring this up. So I don't know. They know. Hopefully we'll find out. You'll ask them. But for me, I just say, how could it be done?
Right.
And so what I think they did is that they worked in my analysis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. There's 7 different blocks that seem to have the same timbre. So I think they had 7 speed settings where he sang along at one given speed and then a different
But sang
speed.
unison every time, sang the same note.
Exactly.
Right.
Or singing along with whatever melody he needed to match from some other reference track. And they did 7 different speed settings, but they were then interleaved so that you didn't hear one speed then another, but you were always ping-ponging back between speed 1, speed 2, or speed 2 and speed 3 and all that. So the net result is it always sounds artificial. But they just had different tape speed processing blocks.
The speed is on, they're flying it to a 2-track, or the speed is the multi-track?
That's what I don't really...
Yeah,
Right.
that could have been done either way. They could have flown it in, or they just had it done. They had enough tracks on the multi-track to do that.
Do it, right.
Right.
They would need a lot of tracks.
What else on the record right there? It's bass and
Drums, bass, and 3 guitars, I think, right? There's like a telephone ring, and then a 2 wah-wah guitars.
Could you get away with that on 2 tracks and just do fame, 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 and then on another track do fame, 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 and then back to the first track, fame, 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 you know what I mean?
And fly them, and you absolutely could. But this tune does have a pretty strong groove, and so I think it'd be really unforgiving if you flew it in out of time, in the
of course.
It's got such feel. So I sort of think they had to
just do it
on the multi.
That's amazing.
Or at least do it in one continuous performance that they were able to line up.
Fly it until it felt right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That was the key back then of timing the flying in. You would get your start point on like a bass drum or a snare drum. Before.
Totally.
So you would just time it with that, and that's the way you could start it every time.
Totally
and you'd get a little lucky.
Yeah.
You can get a little lucky and get it the first time.
But if not, you use your mark from the first time and you go earlier.
Move it a little bit, right? Oh, I'm a little late. You move it up a little bit. You still try to hit right on that downbeat.
Exactly.
And each tape machine had a little bit of a different transport.
Well, that's how you have the mark, and if it's a little late, you know what I mean? Then you would scooch it back.
Was that your job? Did you do that?
I mean, I got pretty good at it because I knew that I had a system. It was like I also had a system which... I don't know, people don't, I don't hear people talking about it, but when you did backwards reverb or backwards whatever, and you were recording on track 15, when you turned the tape over, it was track 10. Every time it always added it to 25, 124, 223, 322. It always added to 25. So because the critical mistake would be flipping the tape and recording on the wrong track and erasing a bass guitar.
Right.
But you always knew what track, if you wanted to record on 15, you would just add the number that got you to 25.
Right.
And it made it really easy to just think about that. You never fucked up when you did that kind of stuff.
Is that literally how you did it though? Because I would take the track sheet and write the numbers backwards. I'd start at 24.
It just added to 25.
That's serious math with confidence. I had to write it down. I would never trust that 15 flipped over.
10, 14, 11.
Yeah.
Because when the tape is flipped,
12,
if you arm
13.
the wrong track,
No, that's what we were talking about.
you find yourself a delivery guy again.
Yes, no, you get a lot of trouble for erasing the bass guitar. Yeah, no, for sure.
Well, speaking of bass guitar and backwards, can we do a backwards bass guitar thing?
Yeah, sure, whatever you want.
Perhaps you remember from 1986 this little bass riff.
I remember nothing. Sure. Paul Simon.
Yeah, so that bass...
Or Seinfeld.
Paul Seinfeld.
So that bass part is pretty absurd, right? It seems unplayable, and the second half sounds backwards to me.
Play it again.
Oh, wow.
You can call me Al. Oh, it is.
Wow.
Absolutely.
And if you're a guitarist trying to play the bass part, you realize you can't play it. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah.
He's a monster bass player, obviously. It turns out this is an audio palindrome. It is a bass riff followed by the same riff backwards, and we can deconstruct it a little bit. So my guess was it's kind of a palindrome. Wouldn't that be cool if it's literally the same riff backwards? So let me just zoom in on the riff itself that's in the Paul Simon tune, and I'll take that and reverse it. And if I reverse that and it sounds the same, then it truly is a perfect little palindrome. It turns out there's a little bit more to it. It's not quite the same, but let's compare it. So here it is on the record. If I reverse that, so you get a little bit of forward.
The middle is reversed.
That's right. So
that's amazing.
Well, so it is reversed, but then they're over. It's only part of it that gets reversed, not the whole riff, and then they get a little overlapped. So there's this phrase. That's the whole forward part,
right?
And then you grab the first bit and reverse it.
Fabulous.
That's amazing.
I always thought that was a flanger or a phase shift. Yeah.
I never
That's
even
so
noticed it.
I always thought it was an impossible bass riff that really grabbed my ears and sounded weird at the end. And it's just a Roy Haley production it's just a wacky idea. This never would have occurred to me.
Yeah.
But someone wanted to take that riff and play with it and dabble.
Is that Roy Haley?
That's Roy Haley, absolutely.
Engineered that?
And Pro Tools is around then, but this was probably done on tape. We should ask him. He is a tape fiend, right?
Done on tape.
He builds entire reverbs out of a bank of tape machines down the hallway, right? So I bet this was flown in.
Yeah.
And you heard that at one point and said something's up with this.
Exactly. Yeah, I said something's up with this. I hope it's a palindrome. But again, it doesn't matter how it happened. The fact is, why is it interesting? Actually, time reversal is timbral, right? If you take a signal and reverse it, it has the exact same frequency content. It's the same level. It's the same notes for the same duration in the same location.
Right, but the transient is different.
It's all reversed.
Right.
Yeah. So that's a timbral thing. That's how important the shape of the waveform is to us. When I talked about the attack and also the end of the note mattering, it's not just the sustained frequency content of a piano note decaying. We care a lot about how it begins and how it ends. And backwards sounds have a unique envelope where they get very loud at the end and they start softly. And that's really unusual to hear in nature. Most things you have to hit them or strike them or strum them to start them vibrating. Right. So most things begin abruptly and decay slowly. And if you reverse it, our brain says, wow, that's really unique. Not much in nature does that. You can sort of persuade a hi-hat to do that. What other sounds start softly and get loud and end abruptly? It's a weird sound.
Yeah.
But it's musical and we love it. But it's so ear-grabbing, it becomes a production variable.
I guess that's also why backwards reverb is so pleasing.
Mm-hmm.
I think so.
It's like a breath, but it's not. And then you're smacked in the face with the lyric. You know what I mean? Wow, that's cool. The whole next record I work on, I'm doing
backwards
it entirely
shit.
Backwards.
Fuck
the artist.
Yeah, backwards is risky because sometimes we think it's really fun, but the artist grows tired of it.
Yeah, exactly. Well, whose record is it anyway?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Well, and so there's Aerosmith's Sweet Emotion. Speaking of, what's your...
Jay Messina. Jack Douglas.
Jack Douglas. But so Sweet Emotion has that riff before the chorus, and it's backwards hand claps. It's apparently Jack himself with Steven Tyler in the booth doing hand claps, and it got reversed.
Yeah.
And it's a hook. It's a powerful backbeat.
Yeah.
And it's backwards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For those of us who are into that, that's a cool timbre.
Yeah, yeah. But also backwards cymbals. Right now with Pro Tools, you can just fly them in wherever you want.
Had to use your flying in trick.
Yeah.
But chances are, in the digital realm, it'll be more perfect than these examples that you're showing us, which will have a different quality.
Yeah.
And not necessarily a better one. Just different. But
yeah.
But when it's so easy to do backwards reverb and backwards cymbals, I wonder if we'll get sort of used to it and it won't be as ear grabbing.
I think I think that's happened.
Yeah, that's for sure, right? I mean, it seems like what's special about that shit is just like you don't know what it is.
Right.
You know, when you know what it is, it becomes as obvious as forward.
Right.
So.
Right.
Yeah.
Another note on timbre. So for me, the timbre was the insight to compression. Compression is really hard to hear if you're listening for level changes, but it's easier to hear if you're just listening for timbral manipulation. And the fact is, we're not very good at hearing compression, right? Think about, let's imagine you hear someone speaking and you don't see them. So you're busy looking at your phone, watching cat videos, and someone says, "My accordion is on fire." When that happens, you know what they mean. You know who said it. You know where they are, left to right, near or far, all that stuff. You even know their emotion, right? You know if my accordion is on fire and they're happy about it, or you know if they're stressed about it, right? Think of all that. We can localize near, far, left, right. Who is it? And are they happy or sad? And we hear all of that in the waveform. We've evolved to be able to hear all of that in the waveform. And it doesn't take conscious analysis. We don't say, triangulating in on the sound using my ears, right. I can tell. We just, by the time we hear it, we understand it, and we know all these things about the speaker, where they are and who they are. That's an insane amount of cleverness in our hearing system. But we can't hear if a device intervened and adjusted its level. The only people who have to learn how to hear compressors are audio engineers. It's just not part of regular life. It doesn't happen in nature. No one else needs to hear it. So while we can hear an incredible amount of subtlety in a signal, we have not spent our lives trying to hear if something's right in gain. So your only chance to learn to hear compression, especially if you're early in your career trying to master compression in the way that your heroes are doing it.
Extremely.
Do it extremely is a great way to learn, but also notice, just tell yourself, I'm listening for timbre. I'm listening for quality differences. I'm listening for differences in the attack of the note, because I don't mean attack time necessarily, though it's attack time that most reshapes the onset of the note. But just listen for the feelings you get associated with how the note begins and how the note ends. Does it sound like a slightly unnatural guitar? Does it sound like a banjo? They're extremes, but listen for timbre, don't listen for level. That's the key, I think, to cracking the code on compression.
One of the things I do notice with compression is size. And I notice that when something is overcompressed, it does not have size.
Feels small.
There's a point in which it stops getting big and
but also gets smaller. And then I also notice back off the peak reduction, it gets big again.
What do you think you mean when you say small, though? Do you mean like literally the physical dimension of the instrument?
I mean size and volume. Yeah. It's so compressed that it just gets squeezed.
Yeah.
Size, like frequency size.
Frequency, that's what I think.
I kind of think, I don't know. I mean, I could be wrong, but I feel like there is that. And, a perfect example is mixing a song and then mixing the next song, and you have the compressor for the vocal set to a certain way, and you bring up the fader on the next song, and it's like, wow, this vocal sounds low. And all of a sudden I turn around and look at the LA2A, and it's like, boom, boom, it's really fucking mainlining. And I pull back the peak reduction, and there comes the vocal.
Right.
So I think compression does affect size. It affects volume and size and frequency. Is that right?
I think it's right. I think it's totally right. But I think a lot of people, myself included, would describe it the way you're describing it as size, but it's
not level.
It's not. So that's what I'm getting to. It's about spectrum. We don't literally picture somebody shrunk the singer.
Right.
You don't picture it in your beautiful mix. You don't now think, hey, my piano's a small piano.
Right.
But we still describe it as size. So there is this concept, I think, where language fails us. In sound, there's something about importance or size that isn't literal size. It's just sort of an aural perception of significance. I didn't realize I was going to be this abstract today when we were talking, but I think it's good for us to get our heads around what that really means. We don't invent miniature guitars when we overcompress guitars, yet we would say that's disappointing, it's small. I think it's disappointing because you don't get decorrelated energy left versus right, and you've narrowed the frequency range to there's not enough lows and highs to make it feel important, and we would still describe that as size. And so I really think there's an attribute to sound that we don't have a word for where we say it's big or small. But that's some proxy for something really important, and yet we never describe it. But audio engineers, I think we all intuitively know what that is. I need this to sound bigger.
Right.
But it's not like I want to inflate the piano into a giant floating Macy's Day Parade piano.
Right.
It's just I know when it sounds huge, whatever the heck that means.
Okay, great. So it's really timbre. It's not size. That's interesting.
And I'm not trying to correct you or say don't ever say silent.
It's
No,
a
I
different
know.
way of
Actually-
looking. It's just
No,
a different
but
how to
this is
perceive
actually-
it. Is
Hey,
there-
do you want to hear echoes?
Yeah.
Don't
Pink
you want
Floyd's
to?
Echoes? Or
Yeah. Have you ever heard this song?
Echoes by Pink Floyd?
Echoes.
Yeah, we love that song.
No, this is a different song, but it has some echoes.
Oh. Oh, yeah. Good slide.
Comfortably numb.
Comfortably numb, beautiful guitar solo, but
Yeah.
we can't listen to that now. We'll just listen to that. So there's that echo on the word hello, but it's
Yeah.
not on any of the other words. It's just the word
Yeah.
hello.
Yeah.
Think about the song without the echo. It sounds something like this.
How'd you take it out?
I just edited
heard a
in
little
a
glitch.
different place. Yeah, you can hear my edit.
Yeah.
So there's nowhere else in the song that I could find that's identical.
Right.
So I just found another part in the tune.
All right, okay, so
That's
just the
harmonically the
groove,
same
right.
place. And so there's some guitars that go away and that's
Gotcha.
it. But it reveals actually what would have gone down probably when they did the vocal overdub, right?
Right.
You probably didn't have the echo on when doing the tracking. Or if you did, you had to be on your game because you have to have the echo for the word hello, but mute it before he
Right.
sings, is there anybody? So probably they just sang it like that, big vacuous space after the word hello, and then is there anybody? And so this echo was planned, it was composed, right? For sure Roger Waters knew he wanted this echo to be there,
Right.
and they sang it so as to empower the echo later, because we know they had a lot of echo in their earlier records.
Right.
But it's fun to explore a little bit, because without the echo, for sure it's wrong, needs the echo, that repeating echo that falls later. But the echo needs to be the right time value. If the echo's the wrong time value, bad things happen. So for example, what if the echo, that's a dotted eighth note.
Right.
Right.
And what if the echo were shorter and it was exactly an eighth note? It would be something like,
Yeah. That's no bueno.
sorry,
No bueno.
no bueno porque.
Right.
Porque. Why is it not good? It's not trippy. It's
Yeah.
too,
Right.
it's nagging.
Yeah.
It's like hello,
Jarring.
hello, hello, hello.
Right.
Jarring.
Right.
It's jarring. So there's the syncopation that comes from the dotted eighth note turns out to be the right sort of thing. It's disorienting. It's a little trippy. It's appropriate to the tune. And it turns out, if you look at it, the repetitions of the echo of hello never fall on a beat again until beat 4, by which time the lyrics have started again and you don't hear it. So the echoes just sort of fall on off beats-ish sort of things. An eighth note means it's really regular.
Right.
Right.
It's persistent. That's not the vibe, right? Our hero Pink is waking up. He's exhausted. He's been drugged out and abused by, the man, and the system is sticking it to him, and he's just coming into consciousness. And this is, he hears someone say hello to him. They want it to be a trippy, echoey sort of thing. What if it were a quarter note instead of an eighth note? Seems too regular, too marching. It's not disorienting. It's not trippy.
It's also,
It also
becomes
kind-
very obvious.
very obvious.
Yeah, but also it doesn't lead into the next line in a very elegant way.
Yeah. So echo, which doesn't really happen in nature. I mean, if you play loud at the Grand Canyon, you get echo on everything, and that's not very interesting. Echo on a single word doesn't happen in nature. This is like the pitch shifting we were talking about.
Yeah.
But just because it doesn't happen in nature doesn't mean it doesn't have creative value. This echo absolutely is a beautiful musical thing. Our brain doesn't say, wait, how many Roger Waters are there? Why is he only repeating these words? We just react to the echo as dreamy and disorienting and fun. But if you're going to do that sort of thing, you can't just say, I need echo. You have to think about what's the meaning of the echo.
musicality.
Yeah, the musicality turns out to be huge.
And
important.
also, as you pointed out, I can't think of another song that has the first word starting with something like that.
We
And
could find something.
You think so? And then
probably.
disappears?
Yeah, but I mean that's just genius. I mean, it's also Bob Ezrin is one of my production heroes.
Is he?
So, yes.
Well, I think that was Alan Parsons. That's Bob Ezra.
Alan
This is
Parsons
Ezrin, yeah.
engineered
Dark Side.
Dark Side of the
Oh, I
Moon,
got it.
but this is The Wall.
Right.
And Ezrin, produced this record. So, but I'm not saying it's Ezrin's idea. It's just such a massive record to make.
Yeah.
Such a journey. He's so fucking good at what he does.
Yeah.
And they're amazing too. I mean, obviously Roger Waters knows what he wants, and it's not, he's not.
Do you do any of this on modern records?
I do, but I in part so my students can mock me for listening to old music.
Old man.
But also, well, there are a few other things. I think a record needs to be around for a while before we know if it matters or if it's important, right? If I will defend that The Wall matters. It didn't win the Grammy that year, but it should have, right? I don't know who won that year, but it's an important record. We can say so now, and we can maybe say why. So I don't want to do stuff that's too fresh because I don't want to overemphasize something that I'm just falling for right now that maybe isn't a durable idea.
Right.
But the other thing is, in a time of smaller track counts, it's easier to hear the effect.
Right.
So these echo sort of effects are all over contemporary records, but they're harder to find in a 96-track project than they are in a 24-track project. So a great reason why I think anyone who cares about audio should go back to the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s is when track count was 24 and below. Right. You have the chance to learn from them a little bit more easily than you can in when someone has 149,000 tracks.
Very well said.
That's great. That brings back memories. That's emotional.
Yeah.
While we're at Pink Floyd, I listened to The Wall when it came out in that summer because of the following abuse from my parents. They said, if you paint the house, we'll get you an electric guitar.
Wow.
Nice.
And to be clear, it was a $250 Ibanez. So I wasn't getting a collectible.
Right.
I still have it. I still love it. But so.
How big was the house?
Well, luckily, really small house.
Okay, good.
And I wasn't paying. It was a brick house, so I'm just painting, little bits of the house. But it, of course, took me all summer. I procrastinated all that stuff. But what I did is I brought speakers to the nearest window, and I listened to The Wall over and over again all summer. And lead paint, fumes, whatever was going on. So I absorbed that album thoroughly, like I'm sure all of us have who care about this music, but never noticed this until I was an adult, which is you no doubt remember how the album begins. And off you go on the journey. But there's also this thing, right? Really begins with this.
Yeah.
It's the little clarinet and something. And then the guitars come in. Right.
Is that like a pre-recorded thing that they sampled?
Almost certainly. But let's turn up that very beginning of the very beginning. There's a little vocal before?
Yeah.
Did you hear it?
Yeah.
I'll play it again.
Oh, it's like beautiful. Should have made it louder.
So listen to the very beginning. There's a little bit of a vocal.
Talking. Oh, so that must have been grabbed off of some crazy record.
Well.
Did you find it?
Listen to the end of The Wall. This is how the album ends, if you recall.
That's Roger Waters, isn't it?
This is where the paint went off the windowsill.
Wait, listen.
A little bit of vocal. I'll turn it up at just the end. The album ends with "Isn't This Where?" and it begins with "We Came In." If you edit the end of the album to the beginning of the album, back to the beginning of the double album.
That's fucked up.
It's a nice,
fucking beautiful.
Basically begging you to listen to it over and over again and paint the house.
Very good work.
Yeah. That's great.
Are we to assume that he's talking over something, or did they make that music?
Yeah, I don't know for sure. Did they just find that piece of tape?
A little record or something.
Right. Knowing them, they.
But isn't that lyric "wall" related at the end? Isn't he talking about the wall?
Oh, definitely. Yeah. He's talking about it. And "Isn't This Where We Came In" was probably an improvised line, and then they decided to split that important line.
Fucking so smart.
Because
it took you.
It's all repeating. Yeah, I'm sure other people noticed, but so what caught my ear is I knew as a kid that it sort of began and ended with this little, it begins and ends with that little strange clarinet-y thing. And it wasn't until I heard the little vocal at the beginning,
Yeah.
I thought, I've got to pay attention to this. It's not just a little ditty.
Yeah, that's great.
So I came to that much later. So I really thought I knew the record.
So you threw this
knew
into
the
a
record.
digital thing and then did an edit and went,
Yeah, and went, holy crap. Yeah,
That's
and then I
genius. Fabulous.
played it over and over for my wife.
fabulous.
That's genius that they did that, and that's genius that you actually
Well,
figured
what
it
did
out.
it feel like when you put it together? Was it like,
Just 10 times more respect for the band yet again,
Yeah.
that they had
Right.
this layer in it. I mean, how many Easter eggs can you put in a record?
Right.
How can you make someone want to listen to a double album again? It's got to be artistically pretty
Right.
compelling.
Right.
And I will listen to this record top to bottom anytime I
Right.
can. I will
Right.
not get bored at any point in there. They've just, it's such a tight composition. It's such
Yeah.
a great story as well as being sonically amazing.
I saw the concert live.
Wow.
Nassau
The
Coliseum.
recent one I saw?
No, the original one.
Oh, wow.
Nassau Coliseum. It was crazy. But no, the concert was spectacular to watch them build the wall.
I'm sure it was.
My buddy Rob, my college buddy Rob, was tripping so hard on mescaline that he stared at the wall the whole time with binoculars. Like he just had binoculars. And I was just like, what the fuck? I didn't want to bug him. I was like, all right, dude, just check out the wall. It's cool. There was a lot of that. at
2
that-
hours of looking at a wall go up
in binoculars.
in binoculars.
Oh, boy. Anyway, thank you so
awesome
much.
having you. That
Yeah.
was really fun.
It was my
and
pleasure.
Yeah.
Really informative.
That really was
and-
fun. Thank you so much for coming down.
Thanks for having me, and keep
Yeah.
doing this podcast. It is
Thank
awesome.
you.
Great. Thank you.
Quit your day job.
It just got easy. We don't
Did you call me a dago?
quit your day.
That's kind of rude. Me and Stewie want to thank all you Gear Clubbers for listening to this crazy podcast we do. If you can, leave a review on iTunes. It really makes a difference. And don't be shy. We love hearing from you guys on the social media at Gear Club Podcast. Don't forget to go to gearclubpodcast.com for Spotify playlists, links and photos for the episodes, and my favorite hot sauce of the month.